So here we'd like to look at converting times, and this is kind of like dealing with stuff, how many days in a week, how many weeks in a month. If somebody tells you they need to write for 37 minutes and 40 hours, well, how many minutes is that total, for instance, converting all into one unit? So it's really important to kind of remember some of the basics about time and time units, and I've tried to capture some of these in this table. Stuff that you guys should probably know off the top of your head. If you don't already, good time to start working on it, because you'll use it a lot throughout life. It's quite important, not just for a maths class, to help you get through solving problems and questions that you have. So, we know there's 60 seconds in 1 minute, there's 60 minutes in 1 hour, there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 52 weeks in a year. We also know there's 12 months in a year, about 365 days in a year, 10 years in 1 decade, and 100 years in 1 century. So these are kind of the basic standards that we would use to find for conversions. And what I want you guys to keep in mind is that if you're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, you want to divide. And if you're going from a bigger unit down to a smaller unit, you're going to times. And we'll see how that works out here. But what I mean by bigger and smaller is between hours and minutes. If I wanted to go from hours to minutes, which one is a bigger unit in a sense? What has more? And you might think that hours is bigger than minutes, because hours is longer than minutes. So you're right, this is the bigger one, this is the smaller one, and here I would times. Going from the bigger down to the smaller, I would times. And the other way around, going from smaller, like a certain number of minutes, into a certain number of hours, going from smaller to bigger, I would divide. So let's think about what's going on here. How many seconds in 3.5 hours? So I want to go from 3.5 hours into seconds. So that's hours to seconds that I want to try to make, and that's big to small. So I need to be thinking about timesing here. And one way that we can think about it is just break it down. Okay, so 3.5. First thing I might want to write is 3.5 is equal to 3.5. Put it into a decimal, because it'll be easier to deal with. So 3.5 hours. Now if I want to find out how many minutes are in that, because minutes is kind of between seconds and hours, looking at what's going on here, let's first convert it to minutes. So 3.5 hours times by 60 minutes in 1 hour, that's going to tell us how many minutes total. And then we're going to times by 60 seconds in 1 minute. So we're going to do it twice to get it from hours to minutes, and then from minutes to seconds. And that will tell us what we've got. So if you go into your calculator and do 3.5 times 60 times 60, you're going to get 12,600. So 12,600 seconds in 3.5 hours. So 3.5 hours is equal to 12,600 seconds. Again, I'm thinking that 3.5 hours, well, if I want to find out how many minutes that is, I'll times by 60, because there's 60 minutes in 1 hour, and then I'll times by 60 again, because there's 60 minutes in 1 second. So going from a bigger, longer unit, like hours, down to seconds, I'm going to times each time I go along. How many minutes in a week? So here I'm trying to go from minutes to weeks, and that you might think of as being going from minutes to weeks, trying to figure out what's going on there, which way to go. So it might be a good idea to go one way or the other, but here, let's try it. So minutes. If we go with 1 minute, how many minutes in 1 hour? So there's 60 minutes in an hour. And then I want to think, well, how many hours in a day? Well, there's 24 hours in a day. So I'll times by that in a day. And then times by that again, because there's 7 days in a week. So if you times all that out, 60 times 24 times 7, you get 10,080, and this is minutes in a week. Oops. Minutes in a week. So here I'm trying to go to to a longer time frame, so from minutes to weeks, minutes being the short thing, the small thing, and weeks being the long thing. So I'm going to be timesing along here. Because really what I've done is gone from 1 week, so week being the big thing, into how many minutes. So I'm going from bigger to smaller. A big 1 week down to the smaller minutes. How many is that? And you times the whole way along to get there. Looking at the next one, how many years in 1500 days? I'm trying to figure out how many whole years are there in 1500 days. So I'm going from days, that's what I know, into years. So this is the small unit into the big unit. If I start at 1500 days, I know that there's 365 days in a year usually. So I'm going to say, well, let's split it up. How many times does 365 go into 1500? So how many years are actually in there? And if you do the division of 1500, sorry, not 15,000, 1500 divided by 365, you're going to get 4.959 roughly. So I'm just going to round that to about 4.1 years. Okay. So 4 whole years and 0.1 of a year, about a tenth of a year in there, so not even a full month, maybe about 3 weeks. But again here, I'm going from the smaller unit of days into years, so I'm going to divide it to break it up into smaller pieces. So how many days in 60 hours? Here I'm going from 60 hours into days, and hours is a smaller unit than days. So if I have 60 hours and I want to know how many days that is, I know that there's 24 hours in 1 day, and that's going to be equal to 60 divided by 24 is 2.5 days. So 60 hours would be 2.5 days. So you have to kind of think through it and then ask yourself if it makes sense when you get to your final answers. 60 hours? Okay, well I know there's 24 hours in a day, so it should be more than 1 day. 2.5 days. Okay, I did the right thing. Makes sense. 1500 days? Well, there's 365 days in a year, so it should be less than 1500. I should be able to make sense of it. Maybe about 4 years, and that's what we're getting here. If I asked for how many minutes in a week, well, if I got a number that was like 0.0000007 minutes in a week, that doesn't really make sense, because I know there's 60 minutes in an hour, and there's lots of hours in a week. So having lots of minutes in 1 week makes sense to me. That big number makes sense. And same for converting seconds into hours, where there's lots of seconds in every hour. So if I started at 3.5 hours, that should be equal to a lot of seconds. And you times it out from 3.5 times 60 for minutes times 60 for seconds, and away you go. So just keep in mind these relationships, and don't be afraid to convert back and forth between them either way you go, trying to approximate what the right numbers will be. And watch out for leap years.